All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. There might be a couple others rolling in, but we will go ahead and get going for the night. So thank you all that are joining us this evening. We're going to talk about wildfire and Lot Assessments 101. I'd first like to introduce a couple folks on the call. So Brianne, I'm going to send it to you first. Brianne is with Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, and we're happy to be here with them tonight discussing this topic. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, thank you so much for attending tonight's webinar. We're excited to see so many people actually join in. My name is Brianne Liston. I am with the state of Utah in the Forestry, Fire, and State Lands Division. I am the Central Areas Assistant WUI Coordinator. And with me, I have Melissa Hart, and she is this area's Assistant Forester. And then we also have on the call our area's Area Manager, Thomas Peterson. So we're super excited to see what SWCA has put together for us and learn along with you.
Thanks, Brianne. And I'll introduce myself. My name is Stephanie Graham. I work with SWCA. We are here partnered with Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, working on wildfires and lot assessments and making sure that communities are prepared throughout Utah and especially in central Utah. So we work with quite a few of you on the call and look forward to working with this of you. And with that, I will pass it to Jerry McAdams.
I am Jerry McAdams, Certified Wildfire Mitigation Specialist with MC Fire LLC. I'm working as a subject matter expert with SWCA on this project. Super happy to be a part of this next iteration of working with Forestry, Fire, and State Lands and the good people in Utah. And I appreciate how proactive, teaching classes across the country and seeing different, folks doing different things. Forestry, Fire, and State Lands in the state of Utah are doing great stuff. So I really appreciate being a part of this. So thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. And then I would also like to introduce to you Tom Welly.
Hi, I'm Tom Welly. I'm also a certified wildfire mitigation specialist and work with my company, Wildfire Preparedness Services, and been working with Jerry as a partner for years. I'm also one of the subject matter experts assisting SWCA on this, and good to be back working with you folks in Utah. We had a pretty good run last year when we did the work in Central Utah, so looking forward to adding on to that again. And hopefully we can provide some information and assistance to you all and help move you all forward to reduce your wildfire risk. Glad to be here.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to get started with a couple housekeeping items. So this webinar is being recorded. Please be aware of that, and you are welcome to share it. We will post it online. You're welcome to share it with your friends and neighbors if they'd like to learn about this as well. All of your microphones should be muted. We will keep people muted throughout the entire webinar. However, if you would like to submit questions, we will get to questions at the end after everything has been presented. At the bottom of your screen, you will see something that says Q&A. If you don't see the Q&A right at the bottom of your screen, you might have to click the ... more button, and then there's a Q&A. So Caitlin Riley is also online with us. She's going to be keeping an eye on those Q&As. And we will address them at the end of the call. All right, so quick agenda, just so we know what we're doing today. We just did some introductions. We're gonna talk about wildfire and fire on a whole and the big picture of it. Over here on the right side, you'll see what gets referred to as the National Cohesive Fire Management Strategy. This is really the core of what many agencies use in order to address wildfire on different scales. So today, we're going to be talking particularly about resilient landscapes and fire adaptive communities, but it all goes hand in hand together to make sure we have safe and effective risk-based wildfire response as well. So it's all linked together, and we're going to talk today about kind of individual level and community level and address that. We're also going to talk about what causes fires to spread. And then we're going to get into lot assessments. I know you all are hearing that this presentation is a lot about lot assessments, and we are going to talk about those and the ability to sign up for those if you would like to have some done on your property, and what actions you can take in response to some of the results you get in the lot assessments. And then again, back to community and the big picture and why we're all here tonight. So with that said, really it all starts with collaboration. If we are collaborating, it could be on any scale. It could be neighbor to neighbor. It could be agency person to a local landowner. It could be just even another community member, right? Communities are encompass everything from the people that live there to the people that come through there. A lot of central Utah, you get tons of tourists and others that come through the area. They're all community, and understanding the collaboration and the risks associated with fire in your area and the hazards is really important on very different scales. So again, we're going to identify common goals within these communities, which are typically to reduce the wildfire hazard potential. We're going to identify methods such as lot assessments, structural hardening, things that you can do yourself to take action to reduce your hazards, and home ignition zone risk reduction. And again, share information with your neighbors. That's how we're going to get the word out. So we talked about this a little bit already also. Why are we here today? To be prepared, right? A number of us have experienced large wildfires. A number of people on the call have been evacuated previously, and we want to make sure that people are prepared. They understand the risks and the hazards and what they can do to mitigate them. So people will often ask, what is wildland fire? I hear fire and I hear wildfire, and where does it all come together? So I just threw up the definition of what is considered a wildland fire. So it's originating from an unplanned ignition source, such as lightning or human causes, that burns in what's known as the wildland, which is generally underdeveloped and uninhabited land. Here you can see in the picture what people often refer to as the WUI, which is the wildland urban interface, right? So we've got people building homes in areas that used to be wildlands, and it still butts right up to areas that are wildlands. And these days, a lot of fires are occurring in both rural and urban environments, right? We heard about Lahaina, we heard about Colorado, we've heard about California. You're hearing about different types of fires that are occurring across different landscapes. So we need to consider the structural aspects as well as the vegetative aspects. And Tom and Jerry, as I go, if you have anything you want to jump in, go for it. So here we're going to talk about what influences wildfire behavior. And I'm actually going to pass to Tom for this one to talk about the triangle.
So, all fire has some requirements, right? We've got to have heat, we've got to have oxygen, and we've got to have a fuel source. But when we get into the wildland fire environment, it's really there's the interaction of these three components of fuels, weather, and topography. And one of the things that is not always thought about, but as we get into the built environment, that our structures also become fuel and play a big role in carrying fire in these urban conflagrations that we've been seeing, and not always in a treed environment, right? We've had several that have occurred in grasslands. So, and those of us that have lived and grown up in and around sagebrush, we know about that too, right? So any of these environments are capable of carrying fire into our built environment, and then the built environment carries the fire. So you have this interaction of fuels, weather, and topography, and obviously the most difficult part to predict its impact on fire behavior is weather. We can manipulate some fuels to a degree, but with the impact of firebrands and embers, really we start seeing that has little impact except where we are very close to the structure. And we'll talk about that home ignition zone concept coming up.
So this is just a little bit more on what influences wildfire behavior. And what you can see here on the right side is a fire going upslope, right? So when we think about topography, oftentimes it's moving upslope, and as it moves upslope, it's heating up and drying out the plants up above it. So you actually have this kind of a progression of not just the fire moving, but also burning out and drying out vegetation when we're thinking about the wildlands themselves.
So it actually moves stick to stick. I mean, it's just the physical process of heating the next piece of vegetation or fuel to its ignition temperature. It gives off flammable vapors and it ignites. And that is just the physical process of fire. And that's how it spreads. And if we have topography or any kind of slope, it will preheat those fuels uphill, and that's why it moves uphill rapidly. Unless we get downslope winds that you're all familiar with as Santa Anas or Chinooks, which can move, it just does the opposite way, only they're a drying wind, so they're even worse. And they move that fire rapidly downhill. So if you've ever experienced that, it's quite something to see.
So now we're going to talk about structures, right? We were thinking about vegetation a little bit before, but what causes structures to ignite? Jerry, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so we're principally concerned with three different things. We're concerned with radiant heat, and that could be either nearby vegetation, like you see in that graphic there, that is burning, or a nearby structure, a neighbor's house, or an outbuilding, or something of that nature that is burning with sufficient intensity to produce radiant heat, which is just electromagnetic waves. And at certain distances, there's good research that shows that if a structure is burning within 50 feet of your structure is likely going to ignite, right? But just having that 50-foot separation makes all the difference in the world. So that's radiant heat. And then we're worried about direct flame impingement. And there's a lot you can do, primarily when you have moderate or low density sort of environment where you've got a lot of opportunity for effective mitigation and there are no additional houses nearby. You guys have a ton of opportunity to make sure that there is no direct flame impingement on your house by reducing fuels directly around your house in that 0 to 5 foot area and then moving outward from there. And then finally, and what is most predominant in terms of urban conflagrations and destructions in this country when you have a windblown event is embers landing on structures, igniting material on roof lines and gutters or directly around the foundations or getting under decks and igniting, flammable, highly combustible, fine dead fuel, pine needle debris, leaf debris, the kind of stuff that you would build a campfire with immediately. That's the kind of stuff that you don't want on your house or under your deck or around your foundation. You want to get that stuff well away from your house. But those embers are what predominantly leads to that sort of urban conflagration where we're losing hundreds or thousands of houses in a particular event. So those are the three things that we look at, and there's different ignition vulnerabilities and structural attributes that you look at pertaining to those exposures. And that's what we do on the ground is we walk around the house on the exterior of the house only, and we look at those particular vulnerabilities based on those three exposures. And there's a great example right there. The left-hand photo shows an auxiliary structure that's on fire near the main structure. And this is an example from Fire Safe Marin, but it shows that auxiliary structure, let's say it's a shed on the left-hand side there while it's burning, it produces enough radiant heat intensity to end up catching the automobile on fire, which is right next to the main, habitable structure or the house, which then in turn creates direct flame to that house. And then the photo on the right, you're seeing a massive amount of radiant heat being produced by the house that's on fire, directly adjacent to another two-story structure that is just catching on fire. And the distance there is such that it doesn't have proper setbacks, doesn't have that proper minimum fuel separation between the structures. And so when the one structure ignites, the other one nearby is likely to ignite as well, which is what you see there. There's a good photo from the IBHS, or the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, that left-hand photo. That just is really a graphic that shows a combustible sided house on the left side. So they took a house, built it, rolled it into this warehouse. They've got an ember generator, and Tom's going to talk about that here in a little bit with the video, but they cast embers at these houses and they have combustible material around the house, pine needle deposition or pine needle debris around the foundation. But it's really showing the combustibility of the house when you have like wood shake siding versus a non-combustible sided house like cemented siding, hardy siding, something of that nature. And that's what the left-hand photo is showing. The right-hand photo is that ember demonstration video that Tom's going to go over. So I'm not going to steal his thunder. And
But these
Tom,
are
you want to talk about embers since you're going to get into this one?
Yeah, so while we tend to think of the big crown fire that we see on the news as being the thing that it really ignites our house, the truth is these firebrands, which are launched in the millions from vegetation and from other burning structures, um, are landing on vulnerable parts of our homes and around our home and the attachments to our homes and igniting those structures just from these itty bitty firebrands. And that's both the threat and the opportunity, right? So if we know that, and we're going to come up against this again, but 90% of our structures that ignite from embers, then that also means that that's an opportunity for us to be able to interrupt the ignition process by being able to make our homes ignition resistant from embers. That means that we can take away close to 90% of the opportunities for fire to ignite on our home. So, we'll go on here, but you're going to see how this ignition process happens just strictly from firebrands.
yeah.
Um,
We'll show a
yeah,
video on that in just a minute, but I just wanted to show a quick little image. This just kind of gives you an idea of, okay, let's say we have a fire burning at where the red dot is in the middle. These are your 1 and 2 mile buffers, and you know, they've seen embers go even beyond that. And so if you have what they call firebrands or embers, imagine that the fire is in this location and your house is down an Aspen Loop. You know, should you be worried? It's something to consider, right? What can you do for your own home? So again, as Tom mentioned, you know, 90% of structures ignited during wildfires are due to embers. It's not that direct flame source.
and this is one of the things where we have to kind of rethink how we approach the problem. For years, we've had kind of a fire management approach to this, and yet we continue to burn down hundreds and thousands of structures at a time. And part of the reason is we are concentrating a lot of times on hazardous fuel reduction projects around communities. But when we can launch embers more than a mile from a fire, it's pretty hard for us to treat that much ground to be able to protect the community. So what we have to do is turn around and look at our structures and work from the structures out because the conditions that is immediately around the structure and the structure itself are going to determine its survivability.
All right, so we're going to show a quick little video. It's only maybe about 1.5 minutes, and Tom is going to give us some narration during it.
So let me kind of explain this first when she starts this. So this is IBHS's research center in South Carolina. Really, it was made for research on hurricanes, but because it had the wind generators there, uh, some of the principal scientists, Jack Cohen for one, were able to determine how to make embers that were scientifically correct for what we're seeing in the field and put it into these large generating fans and ignite them and launch them onto this home. This home is sitting on a turntable that turns it and changes the aspect into the wind. And as Jerry said before, we're able to put different kinds of siding, different kinds of roofing, different kinds of windows, different kinds of planting material around that structure, on that structure, and test how they react to embers. So you'll see that these embers are being put on the house somewhere around a 20-mile-an-hour wind. And at the base of the home, or on the left there, where you're starting to see those ignitions, that's pine straw, that's pine needles. And then we have moving to the left front of the house, we'll have bark mulch or bark dust or beauty bark, however you want to call it. And all of those are igniting within seconds. You'll also see the ignition of debris in the gutter, and you're going to see both metal gutters and vinyl gutters here that you'll see how they react when they become involved with flames. And generally now there's the vinyl gutter that's failing. You've got fire on the roof line at where the gutter line is, and that's the most vulnerable part of the structure's roof. If you've got anything other than a wood roof, um, you're pretty good. But that gutter line where it's burning in the gutter is where it can get underneath whatever ignition resistant roofing you have. And you can see that this just bark mulch up against the foundation is now putting that flame in direct contact with the siding. And that's right where we don't want it. So that's why part of the requirements that we put into uh, assessments is a 5 foot non-combustible zone. If you look there to the right, you can see the embers and debris blowing in the wind. This is what starts to carry fire from one structure to the next, causes spot fires within the community. So this is a very good example of a very low intensity windstorm.
Okay, I'll let her.
Go ahead.
I'm just gonna make sure everyone's muted.
Yeah, and that corner of the house is called an itinerant corner. It just gets it out of the wind a little bit. That allows a lot more convection, heat transfer to occur. And now this home is well involved. Um, and again, the issue here is uh, nobody's home, right? You're evacuated. Fire department, quite likely, if we have multiple ignitions of structures at the same time, we're likely not going to be able to cover all those exposures. So some of these homes are going to burn freely to the ground because nobody's there. And this is why we push in the assessment part of this for these homes to be able to uh, do the work needed around them so that they can stand alone without the fire department intervening, so that fire can come to the community and the community's still standing when it's all over.
Thanks, Tom. Oh, I'll just speak this in. All right, so a little bit more again, thinking broadly in terms of what is the risk that you all have. There's a website here, and Caitlin, if you could check this website into the chat, that would be great. So this is called what they term the URAP, Wildfire Risk Assessment Portal. And if you go to this website, you can zoom in and zoom around, and they've got information in there about risks and hazards that you can see where wildfires have historically been throughout the state. They have a new map in there now about values of resources, and if there's fires happening at the time, there's fire perimeters being shown in there as well. So this is back to kind of the case study that we did in Sanpete County a year or two ago. And just a couple things to note here. When you're zooming around URAP and when you're thinking about fire models, is, what is the hazard model? What is the hazard potential in an area? So this is a prediction of a location's susceptibility to wildfires. You can see high is in red, low is in green, and it incorporates the intensity of the fire and the difficulty to manage that fire. It incorporates fuels and vegetation data, as well as historical fire occurrence and more. Here's the modeled suppression difficulty index. So again, when we're thinking about suppression, we're thinking about how easy or difficult would it be to put out a fire in the area. So this type of thing takes into account topography. Remember how we talked about topography earlier? It takes into account fuel types, so vegetation, what type of vegetation do you have in the area, expected fire behavior in the area, and how easily accessible is it to firefighters. So some areas may be dense, but it's looking pretty good in terms of where firefighters can go safely. Do they have safe ingress and egress areas, turnaround areas? Where can they put some of their equipment? So this is just another one to consider. And modeled potential risk to structures. So this one here predicts the vulnerability of structures to wildfire hazards. So again, dark red being high, more of this yellow color being a low potential risk to structures. So again, thinking about the consequence of the fire to the home in an area. And again, this one's really taking into account vegetation and potential ignition. So we started off talking about the community level, and we just want to make sure everyone thinks about the community level as a whole. So we'll continue talking about this topic, but you can make a big difference in and amongst yourself. You can make an even bigger difference if you have the collective community as a whole taking actions to reduce the hazards in the area. We're going to watch one more quick video.
Let's say a wildfire is burning in a nearby forest or shrub steppe and is now racing towards your community. You might be thinking that as long as your house isn't on the edge of town, you don't have to worry much about it. But the reality is everyone who lives in this community is at risk. And here's why. First, it's not the wall of flames from the wildfire that's most likely to threaten your home. It's the millions of embers that are carried on the wind that are your main concern. High winds can actually drive these burning embers up to 5 miles ahead of the flames. They can then land on your roof, in your leaf-filled gutters, sucked into attic venting, or ignite hedges, wood piles, or outbuildings near your home. Secondly, there's a whole lot of fuel for fire in a house, and when houses do catch on fire, they can send flames up to 70 feet or more in the air, making even more embers that spread fire throughout the community. In densely built neighborhoods, fire can quickly spread from house to house or leapfrog to other neighborhoods. How do you go about suppressing this kind of fire? So even if your neighbors have done everything they can to prepare and protect their home, what you do or don't do around your home and property directly impacts them and the rest of your neighborhood. We're all in this together, and we're only as strong as our weakest link. The only way to prepare for wildfires is to work together as a community and get everyone's property ready to go long before the fire starts. And once we're ready, we've got to stay ready.
All right. So one thing I struggle with a little bit with that video is it almost makes it look like cut down every tree. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more. That doesn't mean you need to clear cut your entire neighborhood. It means you need to take the vegetative fuels into consideration when we're thinking about hazards around your home. And Jerry and Tom will talk about this in a little bit, but we're going to talk now a little bit about lot assessments and what's coming up and what you can do and components that we look at. So today we're going to talk more so about something called hazard mitigation methodology. This came out of NIST and CAL FIRE a number of years ago, and it really is a comprehensive assessment looking at the relationship between vegetative fuels and exposures and home hardening or structural hardening at the structure level and then within the parcel. Jerry, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Yeah, so as I had mentioned before, we're looking at various structural attributes and how they could be potentially affected by any one of those three exposures, again, radiant heat, direct flame, or embers. And so as we go around the house and we do the lot assessment, we're looking at all those intricacies. And the hazard mitigation methodology is pretty complex, but it's really based on good fire science, more recent fire science, and breaking up fuel continuity on the landscaping, making sure that the house is ultimately protected from those three types of exposures. Just to give you an example of how in-depth the hazard mitigation methodology goes, Table A in the NIST hazard mitigation methodology has 40 different attributes on any one particular structure that could be potential ignition vulnerabilities just for embers. And so Tom and I have been doing this stuff a long time, and we go around the structure and we're very thorough in what we're doing, making sure at the end of the day that you and your family are much safer from the threat of wildfire, and providing those prescriptive recommendations to help you, meet that goal. And this is just a graphic that Alex Marangides from NIST had put together, showing the different relationship between other structures nearby, And you see the multi-parcel spatial analysis there where you've got a barn, you've got a house, you've got this other house, an RV. So they look at, in their research, they looked at the interconnectedness of fuel packets in an overall development. So it's not just a parcel-based sort of look at things. It is looking at the bigger picture and then honing in down to the parcel level and looking at that interconnectedness of fuels. And at the end of the day, protecting your home from wildfire is all about breaking up fuel continuity and making sure that you're protecting yourself from those three types of exposures that we talked about. And here's just another graphic showing neighboring lot exposures from an auxiliary structure. So your shed may be set back far enough away from your house that it doesn't end up affecting your house if it ignites, but it may very well affect the resident next door, right? And so just again, showing a graphic that depicts that interconnectedness of fuel in a development where you've got houses nearby. And here's some good examples. Stephanie, were you going to talk about this or do you want me to talk about it? I'm happy to.
Go for it, and I'll jump in if I.
Okay, great. All right. So they've done a lot of really good fencing research. Just like 2-3 years ago, there were some good fires. When I say good fires, I'm a retired firefighter. So a good fire isn't necessarily a good fire to the folks that experienced it, but to a firefighter it is. But there were some good fires down in Dallas, Texas, where you had fences that burned. They had helicopter video of these fires. You had fences that burned directly up to the house, caught the houses on fire, the houses were lost. And so there has been great research that the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety and NIST and others have done on separation distances for fencing. And when you've got a fence that attaches perpendicular to the corner of your house, you want at least an 8-foot separation. That's what the NIST hazard mitigation methodology says. But then the fence that runs parallel to the side of your house between you and your neighbor's house, if you live in a high density sort of development, a single, parallel fence should be a minimum separation of at least 10 feet based on all the fire science and multiple burns that they've done. You want at least 10-foot separation. So at the end of the day, I just tell people, hey, make sure that you don't have any sort of combustible fencing within 10 feet of your house, period. Right. And then if you had double fences that you see in that middle photo there, where you've got two neighbors that put up fences right next to each other, that increases the amount of heat release rates and everything else to the point where you want a minimum 20-foot separation away from structures for a double parallel fence. And so there's just a lot of nuance and different things associated with this. But again, at the end of the day, we want to make sure you guys are safe and your families are safe and that your houses survive a wildfire. So we look at things in a very nuanced sort of way and make sure that we're thorough in what we do. And again, at the end of the day, making sure you guys are safe.
So I just wanted to add to this. We talk about fences being fuses, and but fences and decks, all these attachments to your house, we consider part of the house. But when we look at communities that have burnt down, and we've got structures that are completely destroyed, and yet we've got green vegetation immediately around that burned out structure, people are like, how can that be? If the fire burned my house down, how did it not burn the vegetation down? But this is an example of the kinds of things that are on our homes that make them more vulnerable to ignition, particularly from embers and low intensity surface fire, than the surrounding vegetation is. So we've got to be able to understand that our homes and our built environment are oftentimes more vulnerable to ignition than the vegetation that's standing around them. So that gives us some keys to how we can prevent the ignition in the first place, and it doesn't always involve cutting trees down.
So this is just an image when we start to think about structures and what structures look like and what are some areas, things that people, do well and things that people could improve upon. As you can see on the right side here, not everyone has a lot this big, but obviously when we think back to the home ignition zone areas and where they've cleared around it, it looks like they maybe even have some metal on the bottom part of their structure over there on the right side. It's closed up pretty tightly. We look at window panes. The roof in this picture on the right is a metal roof. And when a lot of assessments are done, you do a full 360, again, looking at the vegetative fuels and the structure itself. But again, looking for, cracks and crevices, where can embers get in, what type of material is used. And I'm going to pass it to Jerry because he'll probably add quite a bit to that.
Yeah, I mean, as you look at the structure, you've got wood siding, but you've got near the foundation, you've got metal siding on there, which is great. There's some combustible debris along the foundation area. What's interesting is a lot of people think that, hey, I've got a stucco home or I've got, cemented siding. But if you feel up underneath the edge of that stucco down by the foundation or, your cemented siding, oftentimes you're going to feel wood behind there. So within a 0 to 5 foot area around your house, you don't want anything that is going to catch the flaming combustion because that will roll right up underneath that siding that happens to be non-combustible and catch that wood on fire behind it. You look at the garage door there on that right hand photo. You've got a good tight seal around the garage door, so that's good. You've got a gable end vent on there, and that's something that could be missed a lot of times is that you might not have proper screening behind that gable end vent. And that's a common cause of, loss in a wind-blown sort of fire event is getting embers up into the attic area through the vents, that aren't properly screened or they're not, rated vents. But, simple 1/8 inch metal mesh screening will help in that kind of situation. But yeah, there's just a lot of nuance and yeah, Stephanie, this is a great photo.
The other part that Jerry was talking about, you've got that metal below the wood siding, but the type of window matters there. Regular anneal glass will fracture at about 180 degrees, which is a lot less than it takes to ignite that wood wall above it. So therefore, that 5 foot non-combustible zone around there is imperative to keep heat off that window because that becomes the vulnerability along with like he said, the gap behind the siding. So those are the kinds of things that we look at as to what's going to burn this house down and what can we do to make that not happen. And sometimes that little 5 foot non-combustible barrier around the house is key to so many things. And it's not that hard to do.
So this image here, we talked about the home ignition zone a little bit earlier, and this is just a representation of what you can do in different zones. So Tom just talked about the 0 to 5 feet non-combustible zone, which is one of the most important components to reducing your hazards of your structure itself. There's the intermediate zone, and there's recommendations for each of these zones. So for instance, the non-combustible 0 to 5 feet, keeping vegetation minimal within that 5 to 30 feet. So, limbing your trees. Recommendations range from 6 to 10 feet high, depending on what kind of vegetation you have around your home. I didn't put it in here, but I have a picture of someone that had all of their firewood with a roof on top, with a tree that goes through the metal roof that's on top of the firewood. That's right next to the house. I probably should have put it in here. So thinking about those sorts of things, obviously summertime's coming up. We often have decking materials on our decks, right? So we have nice furniture we enjoy sitting at, but if you're not home especially for a prolonged period of time, that's something to consider. Jerry pulled himself off mute, so I'll pass to him and then he could pass to Tom because we could go on and on about the home ignition zones for quite a while.
Yeah, for sure. And you look at the home ignition zone graphic here, it goes out to 100 feet. That's not always the case. Sometimes we're going to go out to like 200 feet. If you've got a home in a very topographically steep sort of area, which having gone there last year with Tom, spending some time walking around homes with Tom and Stephanie and Justice Jones, who's not on this call, but there's lots of homes. Legacy and has lots of homes in topographically steep areas. And so, in a situation like that, because fire burns uphill, because you have convective, currents of heated air that come uphill, you want more separation on the downhill slope sort of side of things. And you might go out to 200 feet or 150 feet instead of 100, depending upon what the topography looks like and all that kind of thing. The graphic doesn't show a lot of trees in that 5 to 30 foot area, but you can definitely have a beautifully aesthetically pleasing landscaping around your house with flowering plants and shrubs and trees, and but you just want to be careful, like the kind of material that you choose, and for your landscaping and for the stuff that's natural, where you built your house and you've got natural environment around you. Start thinking about breaking up some of that fuel continuity within those zones, and we would provide those prescriptive recommendations to you.
Yeah, and I was going to say the same thing. A lot of times these graphics show that it's a lot more stark than it really needs to be. But we've had multiple fires that research has been done on that says if we've got discontinuous fuels within 30 feet of the home, we have between 80 to 90% survivability in major fires. So clumping those trees and brush and breaking that up a little bit so that they're not a continuous fuel bed in those zones are really key. And the big thing about the home ignition zone, it's a pretty small piece of the planet that we have to be concerned about in order to protect the home. We're not talking about miles around the home. We're talking about a few feet. And the most important stuff is the home and then out to 5 feet. And the next most important zone is 5 to 30 feet. And so it's prioritized already for us to give us the things we need to do to stop the ignition of homes. And if they don't ignite, they don't burn. If they don't burn, we don't have a disaster on our hands. And that's what we're trying to make happen.
And to that point, Tom, I feel like the next photos might help your comments.
Yeah, so these are two examples where we had heavy fire come through these areas and had survivability, and that's not always what's expected, right? We would expect uh, that we would not have survivability when we have extreme fire. This photograph on the left is from Montana. That was 40, that fire came through 45 feet from that wood home. But it did not have the ignition vulnerabilities to have it catch fire. And so it did not meet the elements of combustion necessary to burn it down. And then on the right, Crown Fire was on this hill, completely around it. It didn't ignite the home or the vegetation right next to the home. So there again, distance is your friend when it comes to Crown Fire, especially. That's the radiant heat that Jerry was talking about. So where we really miss the boat is lower intensity exposures, and we have lots of loss. And that's counterintuitive too. We think smaller fire, we're going to survive that, when actually it can be pretty efficient at burning our houses down if we don't address the vulnerabilities. So that's what all of this is about. I'll let you take that one, Jerry.
Yeah, as you can see underneath the structure, you've got all sorts of vulnerabilities. We look at how decks and other attachments, pergolas, awnings, trellises, all that kind of stuff, arbors that are attached to the house directly. How are they attached? Is there a separation of, metal flashing there that, if embers were to get on that material that's in a horizontal configuration like a deck, and they get up against that siding of the house, is there a piece of metal flashing there that keeps that ember at bay, if you will, or is it wood on wood? And so we look at all those different sort of nuances. We look at combustible material stored underneath decks, and obviously, you get fire going underneath the deck on the right there. in that scrap wood, that's not so great, right? And in and of itself, the wood is not going to catch the flaming combustion right now with a few embers, but the pine needle debris around it will, right? It's just like building a campfire. So that pine needle debris is going to catch fire right now within a few seconds with a few embers, and then the wood next to it is going to get burning, and then the deck support's going to get burning, and then the deck's going to get burning, and now the house is gone, right? And so again, it's about breaking up fuel continuity. Those deck supports are sitting on concrete, right? If you cleaned all that material out from underneath there and put a base of crushed granite or decomposed granite underneath there, and you didn't have that fine dead fuel, what's going to catch the flaming combustion? Nothing, right? You might get an ember in the deck, but that deck is going to take a long time to get to flaming combustion. That gives folks an opportunity, firefighters, to come by, patrol the area, put out those little hot spots. You just really do not want anything to get to flaming combustion right away, or have the propensity to sit there, smolder for a long period of time with no attention to get to flaming combustion. So we look at those things.
So we talked a little bit about lot assessments and what comes out of lot assessments. When we'll talk about how to sign up for them in just a minute, but this is just kind of one image. I know it's a lot of words on a screen, but these are the types of metrics and items that we're looking at. So skylights, roofing, siding, vents in particular, gutters, as you saw in the video earlier. And then this is kind of when you go through it, you can identify, oh, you know what, this area maybe could use some help, right? So what actions can be taken? And we recognize that not everyone has the financial means in order to do retrofits to your existing house. When you're thinking about building a new house, it's something to consider. And there's different costs, right? Your roof that's going to cost you $20,000, $30,000, you may not have that. But you can do maybe possibly some mesh venting, some 1/8 inches Jerry mentioned earlier. You got to think about airflow in the process, but there's things that you can do, thinking about the fences that you have or materials around it, or as Jerry just said, can you just clean up underneath the deck and put some rock around it? So the outcome when we do lot assessments, and I will back ourselves up a little bit and say there are different types of lot assessments that are being done by the state as well as the local fire departments or districts. And they can go into as much depth as this, or they can focus on some of the big ticket items and be an easy kind of 2-page reader. So either way we do it, the outcome of what an individual landowner will see will have some recommendations on ways in which they can take action to reduce their hazards around their property. So I'm going to leave that probably at that. And then again, here's just an image of, we talked about this earlier, where can embers enter the house? What are some of the typical ways in which embers or some of that radiant heat that we talked about can do it? So we talked about this. There's some recommendations on the side, cleaning debris from your gutters and installing certain gutter guards to reduce the debris. Thinking about, again, where are those holes? So types of siding that you could use or type of roofing materials that you could use. Using some metal mesh over where you have airflows, as long as you're able to do that based on your other codes. Installing double pane windows. So Tom mentioned this earlier, right? If you have a single pane window, which most people don't have, but in some older homes, they still exist, they're going to combust, right? They'll melt and then they'll burn the frame around the window more easily than others. This talks about fire retardant treatments on decks and fences. Jerry or Tom, do you guys want to hit on that? Because this is often a question I hear. Should I use a fire retardant material?
Tom, do you want to start with this one, or do you want me to talk?
Well, I think we could both talk for a while on this, but
Yeah,
here's the deal. A lot of those treatments have not been tested by UL or ASTM. And so they are an unknown as far as how long they will last in terms of retardant capability. They all have some retardant capability, but we just don't know how long it lasts. They all break down in sunlight. Um, and how it's applied, depending on the material and what it's applied to, also makes a difference. I will say that at nfpa.org, or on firewise.org, I'm sorry, there are some fact sheets that we produced when I was with NFPA, in combination with IBHS, where we took the science research and put it back into English so that people could read it, and we could explain the pros and cons of a lot of different things. And coatings was one of them. So you can actually get those for free and look at them. Gives you a pretty good explanation of what works and what doesn't on a lot of things. Exterior sprinklers, all that kind of stuff is really discussed there.
Thanks, Tom. And then the last one on here just talks, we talked about this earlier, thinking about combustible materials, firewood. Could you move it further away from your home? We know it can be hard to walk back and forth to go get firewood, but it's a consideration. Or if you could cover it, in an area. And then furniture, obviously it's summertime, right? Again, people are gonna have furniture out, but if you're gone for a prolonged period of time, is there a way in which you could store it?
Jerry, you might want to go
Yep.
back there just a minute. Yeah,
Yep.
Jerry, you might want to talk about like the composites and stuff for decks and fences.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of composite material out there for decks, for fencing. There's different companies, Trex for a long time, they made Trex Escape, which is a Class A rated material. Class A rated spreads fire less than a Class B or a Class C rated material, so it's better for ignition resistance. And so when you hear somebody talking about, hey, use a Class A roof or Class A decking or Class A siding, that's what it means. It's just more ignition resistant. And so there's decking that I'm just trying to think real quick. TimberTech AZEK makes a couple different versions that are Class A rated they're good. They're a plastic wood composite deck, but they're Class A rated. So they're good for use in wildfire prone areas. A company called Fiberon makes Promenade and some other model, and those are also Class A rated material. There's also very, very expensive wood out there like Ipe that you can use to, construct decks with, like Ipe, Kumaru, Machiche, Batu. There's like 4 different South American hardwoods that are all like super dense, very, very difficult to get to flaming combustion. And from a construction standpoint, they destroy saw blades and drill bits, and I mean they're just really, really dense. And so those are, if you're going to choose wood, that would be a good, thing to do. In California, California State Fire Marshal's office, on their website, they have a list of all sorts of construction materials and for wildfire prone areas, and they still include redwood decking. And I think that might be because of the redwood lobby in California, but I'm not entirely certain. But redwood decking is not a great material to have. It's Class B rated, and it will burn more readily than other things. You can also use steel. If you've got decking already on your house, there's a wildfire home retrofit guide that University of Nevada Extension Living with Fire puts out that recommends that you take up the first several deck boards that run parallel to your house and replace them with like a metal drain channel, which is essentially a deck board. That you've seen probably in concrete and stuff like that. They're just a metal board with a bunch of slats in it, and they're typically made of extruded aluminum or something of that nature, or steel, but you could replace it with that. So there's lots of different options out there.
Thanks, Jerry. So this, if you would like a lot assessment, where we'd be happy to come out and help you, walk around your home, identify some of the vulnerabilities and actions that you can take. Again, you'll end up with a report, an individualized report that identifies those hazards and actions you can take. There will be some photos of the home, as well as some notes in there. You can sign up for it. And Caitlin, if you could stick this also in the chat, that would be great. This is the hub site for Central Utah. And this is particular to Central Utah. So if we have some of you on the call that are not from Central Utah, we recommend reaching out to your local forestry, fire, and state lands office. But if you are with Central Utah, this is the hub site to go to. There's also a lot more information on there besides lot assessments. But at the top, there's actually a new banner that's going to tap you to the lot assessment. But also, if you scroll down, you can put your permission slip in there, and then we will come through. It doesn't guarantee that it's going to happen in the next week, but we will be in contact and let you all know which areas we are going to be addressing sooner than later. You'll also, like I said, find a lot more information on the hub site, for instance, the mitigation form, identifying ways in which you are taking action, and it can provide some support to some of the grants that are being distributed throughout the state. And then I just threw this on here as, what else is the state doing? What else can we do that would reduce our risk? And where do we put, our slash? Oh my gosh, we have so much slash. What do we do with it? So there are chipping programs, again, happening throughout the state. And recommendation is to reach out to your local forestry, fire, and state lands office. And they are setting those up right now. So if you're interested in having a chipping program done around your area, please reach out to them and they can provide some more information. But there are some do's and don'ts about chipping programs. But the biggest thing, you probably wonder, what do I do with all this slash that I have? I want to make this 0 to 5 foot, or work on my, 5 to 30 foot zones that we just talked about. There are ways in which we can help you to utilize that material. And that is all we have for today. So I'm going to stop sharing and check in with Caitlin and see if we have anything in the Q&A.
We do, yeah. We've got a couple of really great questions. I'll just go ahead and read the first one. First question is, could the subject matter experts offer comments and mitigation ideas for homes with flat roofs that generally have just a membrane layer? We are aware that setting up some sprinkling capability helps, but it's not always convenient.
So yeah, typical flat membrane roofs, the material is typically Class B rated. It has a higher flame spread index than what a Class A rated material would. The idea with the flat roof is it's no big deal having a flat roof. You just want to make sure that it's clean, right? That you have no combustible debris that accumulates on that roof that catches to flaming combustion. Knowing that during a wind-blown fire, you're going to have embers rain down around your property and will likely land on that roof. But if it's not catching anything to flaming combustion right now, then you have a better odds of actually, being survivable, or having your house be survivable rather, and have firefighters patrol that area and make sure they put out little hot spots. And so, yeah, again, just having membrane roofs is not in and of itself a problem per se. It's the maintenance of those membrane roofs that makes all the difference in the world. Tom, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered that rather well. Keeping it clean is key.
Great. And just a reminder, if you have questions, at the bottom of your screen, you will see something that says Q&A. And if you could stick your questions in there, we will get to them. If you do not see it right away on the bottom of your screen as Q&A, you'll see a circle with some dots, 3 dots in it that says more. Click on there and you'll be able to see something that says question and answer or Q&A. So just stick your questions in there. And Caitlin, if you want to read us the next one.
Yep. So there are actually 2. They kind of touch on the same topic, but the first is, where we live along the WUI, storm damage to the trees leaves behind a lot of dead branches and debris that's not always easy to haul to a convenient location for chipping. How important is it to get rid of the dead wood and smashes, even if they are scores of feet away from the structure? And there's another question that sort of just tags right on to that. At what point does downed wood no longer present a risk and not require removal?
I'm gonna say that it depends, right? It depends on the fuel continuity. So if you have something 100 feet out away from your house, or 200 feet out away from your house, but you have fuel continuity that could lead a fire, 200 feet away from your house all the way back to your house, then that's a problem, right? And so when you're working within those zones, a 0 to 5 foot, 5 to 30 foot, 30 to 100 foot, sometimes out to 200 feet, you want to break up the fuel continuity on the landscaping. If that means that you're reducing, shrubs underneath, tree canopy to make sure that there's no surface fire that can transition up into that tree canopy, then you do that. If it means limbing up trees 6 to 10 feet off the ground, you do that. In and of itself, dead wood out well away from your house doesn't pose a hazard, right? It's going to burn, produce some additional embers and that sort of thing. But so long as it doesn't have the propensity to catch what's next to it on fire, and then what's next to that on fire, and lead a trail of fire back to your house, that's the kind of things that we're looking at.
So I'm gonna also tag on to that if you are in an area, especially in central Utah, and again, this could apply to other parts of the state. Especially we are developing what we call community wildfire councils, and if you are aware of those in your area, we have them right now, especially in Sanpete County, Wayne County, and Paiute County. Reach out to the community wildfire councils if it's something that you cannot address yourself, and if you need support in moving some materials, we can work together collaboratively to see if we can get some of those materials moved off of your property. So reach out to myself or Brianne or Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, and we're happy to help you with that. Caitlin, should we go to the next one?
So we've got a question about wildfires in LA. The question is, wildfires a challenge for SMR Legacy in Willow Glen. What do you think went wrong in Palisades, California? That was an LA high-end community. Anything learned there beyond what you've shared?
So all of us in this business got hammered with questions about what happened in LA, right? Whether we live there or not. And I'll tell you, Jerry and I both teach a national level NFPA class on assessing structure ignition potential from wildfire. I taught that class 2 years ago in Malibu. One of the homes we used as an example for the class burned down this last time. Jack Cohen, the principal scientist of this method that we all use, he did that class in 2018 in Pacific Palisades. So the information for those folks was there, but their fate was sealed decades ago because of the way we built that and where we built it, and then allowing the vegetation to grow around it that we did. And it's one of those things that as fire prone as California is, it doesn't always burn everywhere at the same time. And the conditions were right, and it's about a set of conditions. It really doesn't matter where, but it's about a set of conditions that created the capability for that to be the firestorm that it was. And once we start getting multiple simultaneous ignitions of structures, generally the fire department is too far behind the 8 ball to catch up to the amount of structures exposed. So all of the noise that you heard around water supply and budgets and all that, frankly, wouldn't have made any difference. We see this everywhere we go. It's the same story, just a different place and a different fuel model. But the story is the same. We get multiple simultaneous ignitions because of how and where we built, and the rest is just up to physics.
Yeah, and I just want to tag on to that real quick. Like that whole area, Los Angeles County, has a massive amount of resources and personnel and apparatus, and they have their own helicopters, for the fire service there and everything else. And those things can't fly in severe winds. They can't. And, so depending upon the circumstances, they may or may not be able to fly and drop retardant and that sort of thing. But the community expects this level of service that even during a windblown event, when you have hose lines that are literally ineffective and blowing sideways in the wind, they still expect the fire department to be these miracle workers and heroes that are going to save the day. And at the end of the day, you can't have enough firefighters, you can't have enough apparatus and personnel to stand up to an urban firestorm like that when you have a windblown event. You have Santa Ana winds or the Marshall Fire where you've got 80, 90 mile an hour hurricane force winds in a rangeland sort of environment that burns over 1,100 structures. The fire department's not going to save the day at that point. The houses need to be standalone, ready to withstand the onslaught and threat of wildfire with embers raining down around the house. protected from radiant heat, protected from, surface fires, knowing that there's still going to be embers that land, and making sure that, the folks have done everything in advance to make sure that those embers don't catch anything to flaming combustion right now. And that's what it's all about. You're not going to stop that urban conflagration by providing more resources. So here's the rub. You take all these resources that you have in LA County. What kind of resources do you have in Sanpete County, right? Or some of the rural counties in Utah? Not a lot, right? I mean, resources are disparate, and they're well trained, well equipped, well-meaning people, but during a windblown event, all bets are off. They're trying to keep people out of harm's way themselves. They're firefighters and personnel. They're trying to get other people out of harm's way and evacuate folks, and they're trying to figure out tactics and strategies to get a stop on the fire at some point. That is the chaos of a windblown event. And frankly, the homes need to be prepared in advance, stand alone, ready to withstand that sort of onslaught of those exposures that we've talked about.
Thanks, Jerry. So the next question is, what effect will House Bill 48, just passed in Utah, have on the wildland urban interface?
Okay, I'm going to start with this, and then I'm going to see if Brianne or Forestry Fire and State Lands wants to add anything to it. So a number of you are aware that House Bill 48 just passed through the Utah legislature last month, and there is not yet a rule in place. So again, the way that legislation works is a bill gets signed, and then there is a rulemaking process that will come out and explain a lot more of how it's actually going to work. Oftentimes, bills are a bit vague, and there will be a rule. At this point in time, the rule has not been done yet. The plan, the way the bill is written, is that it will be done by early 2026, January 2026. There will be a public comment period that'll be at least 30 days. We don't know when exactly that will be, so please just stay apprised. And again, if you are not connected with your community wildfire council, please get connected with it, and we'll help to provide some updates on that. I'm going to let them talk about the WUI code itself. I will just say there's been a lot of questions about the wildland urban interface, or the WUI as people call it. And the bill really focuses more so on, understanding which areas are in low, medium, high risk or hazard areas. There will likely be an addition to the map that's on URAP that we pointed out earlier, that will get incorporated and possibly address some of the WUI issues. As for the code, the state has not code, but I will let them speak to that as to if that will be incorporated. Oh, I might have lost the question actually, Caitlin. I moved to answered. So it's more about the WUI than the code. I'm sorry, I was reading two comments at the same time. So what impact will it have? Again, pay attention to it. It will have an impact in terms of areas that will be labeled as low, medium, high. The way the bill is currently written is there could be a fee associated with it, but there's a lot of discussion happening right now on how areas will be assessed, what people can do to reduce their risk, and how it's incorporated with insurance companies and others. So I guess my biggest suggestion is there are changes being made. Stay apprised of it when they open the public comment period. Hopefully we'll have some more answers at that point in time, and the actual outcome and explanation of it will really come out in early 2026. But I'm going to pass it to Brianne if she wants to add more to that.
No, I think you covered it really well. The biggest thing is that, we are currently still trying to work through all the rulings and to find the best way to handle the bill that was passed. Unfortunately, there are no definites on it as we are trying to figure out the best process. So my biggest suggestion to everyone is to find the House bill, read it, become familiar with it if you are interested, so that when the public forum comes available, you guys are more prepared to come forth with your questions and any comments that you may have, any concerns. So, yeah, that's kind of the biggest thing. And in terms of the WUI code, you're correct. We don't have the most current one adopted by the state. That one does have to deal with legislature, and it's also being talked about within the HB 48 bill, I believe. But that's another one of those discussions that hasn't been finalized yet.
Thanks, Brianne. And that kind of goes to this next question that I see here, which talks about, was the assessment form shown, the new one that the state's recommending, instead of the old one in terms of the WUI code. So to parse that out a little bit, what we showed on the presentation today was one that was developed based on the hazard mitigation methodology, or the HMM as some people call it. There are still multiple different types of assessments being done. As I mentioned, there's the wildfire hazard form that a lot of fire departments still like to use. That's just kind of a little bit simpler. It just depends on what the area is interested in and what is best for the community. In terms of, and I am going to actually put this back on House Bill 48 for a minute. I think at some point there will probably be a recommendation from the state to choose one type of assessment over another. Really, the conversation tonight was just a more general, broad conversation on the types of items that you could see within assessments. So we could use either one. They both have pros and cons to them. So it's not, we are not saying on the call tonight that, hey, you should only use this one. Both of them have their uses at this point in time. There's not a specific recommendation at this point in time. It's just one that we have used previously to provide to the community so they can see some of that nitty gritty of actions that they can take to reduce their hazards on their structure. So looking at structural ignitability and the fuels around it. Caitlin, you can go to the next one.
Sounds good. Next question is, can you recommend some Class A membrane deck over garage walkable coverings, such as rubber mats, plastic tiles, concrete pavers, and then weight in question mark, etc.
That was a mouthful. I'm gonna, send to Jerry if you can remember that whole mouthful.
Yeah, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is, can you recommend some Class A membrane deck over garage walkable coverings, such as rubber mats, plastic tiles, concrete pavers, etc.?
So rubber's not going to be Class A. Your membrane roofs and membrane for coverings like that are not going to be Class A. They're going to be Class B. Now, what's interesting, and this just probably, you don't even need to know this, but you can create a Class A roof by assembly with a Class B membrane on it. And that just means that the roof as a whole is not going to spread fire to the rest of the house as easily as it would otherwise, right? So you build it to a Class A rating by assembly, assembling all those components, which reduces the fire spread of that particular roof. We don't need to go into more detail on that, but anything that's non-combustible, so your Spanish tile roofs, stucco, cementous material, any of that non-combustible material, metal, is great for roof coverings. If you're talking walkable material like a deck, or something of that nature, then you would want a Class A rated sort of decking material like we've talked about. And there is different options there. You could use Ipe if you wanted to use wood, or you could use a composite, that I've talked about from TimberTech or Fiberon or something of that nature, or you could use, concrete. So there's lots of different options, and I guess I'm not envisioning kind of what you're thinking of, but I would definitely try to focus on non-combustible or Class A rated material. Tom, do you have any other thoughts?
Well, it sounded like it was a deck over a garage thing too, so there may be a need. You'd need to check with your building and local building and fire codes, but there may be a need for some sort of a fire delay barrier on the ceiling of that garage for the under part of that roof. But usually that's between the garage and the living space. So I don't know if that even applies. So you might want to check with your local building official and what the building and fire codes are that apply there.
Thanks, Tom. That appears to be the last question in the Q&A. So if there are others, now's your chance to pop them into the Q&A or the chat, and we'll try and get them answered. And if not, we've got a general email that I'm going to drop in the chat that you can send any follow-up questions to.
I am not seeing any more roll in, so I think we will probably wrap it up for the evening. And again, say thank you so much. As Caitlin mentioned, this was recorded and it will be posted online to the hub site, and we will send that out to all of you that got this invitation tonight. I just want to say thank you also to Forestry Fire and State Lands for having us here and partnered with them and helping throughout. And we are so excited and happy to be part of this community as a whole, meaning the state of Utah as a whole, and working with you all directly. It's really great to see the interest and excitement and ways in which you can, help yourself and help your neighbors. And so excited to just continue moving forward. And Jerry and Tom, would you like to add any final words? And then I'll pass to Brianne for any final words.
No, I just want to thank everybody for being on the call today. I wish there was more interested folks out there that wanted to protect themselves and their families and their communities from the threat of wildfire. And I just thank you all for your time. Again, wanted to thank Forestry Fire and State Lands for all the good work that they're doing, and SWCA.
I echo the same stuff. You're the ones that are going to make the difference. And if it's not you, then who, right? So good on you for being here and trying to get some more information. Great work by SWCA and Utah Forestry Fire and State Lands. That kind of collaboration and partnership is key for communities to be able to change the trajectory of losses that we're seeing. So this is what it takes, and I'm glad to see you guys involved in it. And we're honored to be able to be here to help.
Thanks, Tom. Brianne, do you want to close this out?
Yeah, I just want to finish it off by saying thank you guys for participating in this. It's been great to work with Tom, Jerry, and the rest of the SWCA crew. No matter how much I sit in these meetings and try to do my own education stuff, putting all of this together, I still find myself learning more and more about it. So it's a big chunk of information to try to grasp onto. So I'm super proud of everyone that came and tried to be involved and to learn more and just make their community better. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Bye.